Reference to file. This is SB 872. SB 872. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 872 by the Committee on Budget and Fiscal Review and Act relating to taxation, making an appropriation therefore to take effect immediately. Bill related to the budget.
Mr. Ting, you may get open.
Thank you. SB 872 amends AB 1838, which we approved on Thursday. There was a clarification around the definition of cannabis products. This was brought to our attention by the City of Los Angeles and the Seating County of San Francisco, and so we are making this one modification in SB 872. Respectfully ask for a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Ting. Mr. Overnolte.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is just a common sense cleanup to the bill that passed overwhelmingly out of this chamber last week that clarifies that the existing taxes on cannabis can still continue to be opposed. I urge an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Overnolte. Seeing no additional discussion or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote. A desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Aye 67, no 0. That measure passes. Immediate transmittal to the Senate. Members, we are now going to move to take up AJR 46 by Ms. Gonzalez-Fletcher. This is AJR 46. Clerk will read.
Assembly Joint Resolution 46 by Assemblymember Gonzalez-Fletcher and others relative to the federal zero-tolerance immigration policy.
Ms. Gonzalez-Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. AJR 46 is very simple. It asks the federal government to rethink their zero-tolerance policy, which has led to family separation, child detention, and now the promise of prolonged family detention at our border. I'm deeply saddened that this resolution is even necessary and frustrated that we have to continuously fight our president and his administration to simply act in a humane manner. What we've witnessed in recent months, it's very personal to many of us, but it really should be personal to almost all of us, because the truth is, nearly all of our ancestors at one point were immigrants. Unless you're Native American or African American, your ancestors chose to come here. And many times, the story isn't always so clean. I think those of us whose ancestors came most recently might understand the complexity of their stories in a different way. I know personally how my father came to this country. And unlike so many of the refugees that are coming today, he didn't come trying to save his life. He came for a better life. But I also know it was complex. He came right when the Bracero program was ending. There was no real line to stand in. But with a wink and a nod, and growers who desperately needed cheap labor, folks could cross the border here to work. It was complicated. The legality of it is complicated. And even today, we try to clean up the way in which he got here, picked our food, packed our food, started a business, paid taxes, sent his kids to college, and still struggles to try to become a citizen. Our immigration laws have always been complex, but so many of us who know those stories of our parents or our grandparents or maybe ourselves see what's happening at the border today and realize that could so easily be us. I'm honest about my family who have come from Mexico, all with different status. Some came on a visa that they overstayed. Some simply came here without any documentation. Some came in what they're calling chain migration now and married somebody. But none of them had a formal path, a legal path. And none of them were facing the atrocities of some of the people coming today from these countries where they're technically fleeing for their life. Most of my relatives didn't come with children that they had to worry about being separated from. They came here and had children. So when I see what's happening today, I'd be a hypocrite to not stand up and say how wrong it is. When we see children crying for their parents and parents crying for their children, when we see the possibility of families living together, incarcerated for God knows how long, we have to think that we're a better country than that. Because no matter if you know your immigrant history, for the majority of us who somehow have an immigrant history, or whether you simply live in California, there is one thing that's clear. We have all benefited from the hard work of those who came here without documentation. It's not a popular thing to say or talk about, but we've had our children taken care of. We've had our bathrooms cleaned. We've had our landscaped done. We've had our tables bussed, our food cooked. And even if you want to deny any of those things, if you've never been eating out at a restaurant or at a hotel, having someone clean up after you, I guarantee you this: you have eaten food that was picked and packed by somebody who's here illegally. And it was always in our best interest to turn a blind eye, but these are people. So we can't, on one hand, have the fruits of the labor of hardworking folks in this state, and on the other hand, look at what's happening at our border, that it just defies humanity, and not stand up and say something is wrong with this.
30 seconds, Ms. Fletcher.
We can't have an open border. That's not what this is about. We do have to have rules, but those rules can treat people in a more humane way, and our immigration policies can be fixed. We need comprehensive immigration reform. We need to treat people like people and not animals. I respectfully ask for an aye on this resolution.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez-Fletcher. Ms. Rubio, you are recognized.
Mr. Speaker and members, thank you for the opportunity to rise today and speak in favor of AJR 46. I was 6 when I was deported to Juarez, Mexico. As you may know, Juarez is one of the most dangerous cities in the world. My father had been part of the Bracero program. When it ended, he continued to come to this country with us to work and to keep us safe. The day they detained my dad, he had been working in construction. We were in a park in Weenie, Texas, and I remember men in uniform talking with him. I was scared. They didn't even give us an opportunity to gather our things before sending us back to Juarez. For a long time, I didn't think I was affected at all or much by that experience. But those frightening memories came rushing back as I watched immigrant families being separated and children caged. This could have been me, my sisters, and my brothers. I thought of my own 2 children. What if it had been them? Not knowing if they were cold or hungry or in danger, and knowing that I was unable to do anything about it. This is horrifying and inhumane. My parents only wanted a better life for us. Fortunately, we were able to return, and I was able to become a citizen. My love for this country, for this gift, prompted me to run for elected office. My family's story is the story of millions who have come here seeking freedom and opportunity. People around the world have always admired America for its compassion and openness to immigrants who want to work hard and strive for their dreams. But today, the current administration has decided to demonize immigrants and separate children from their parents. Parents fleeing poverty and violence elsewhere for a better life are now simply just trying to reunite with their sons and daughters. Thousands of children will be traumatized forever. This is wrong, irresponsible, and it goes against the ideals of a great nation built by immigrants. Let us remember who we are. America is and has always been a beacon of hope to the world. Let us return to this ideal and end the zero tolerance policy now. On behalf of my family, the Latino Caucus, the Women's Caucus, I urge your aye vote on AJR 46.
Thank you, Ms. Rubio. Mr. Gibson, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise also in support of this AJR 46 and urge number 45 and his administration to immediately cease and desist implementation of the zero tolerance federal immigration policy. This current policy is inhumane, and it sickens me. As a parent, it saddens me that children are stripped away from their families, from their parents, just to seek asylum. I cannot imagine if my own children were stripped away from me, the situation, the sadness, the fear, not only for me, but also for my children as well. To punish these children is inhumane. This is not America, and it's not American. We don't do this. We're better than this. And I want to remind most of us that this is not unusual. Even though I've read about it and people told me about it, I can only imagine what Africans went through, not only to being pulled from their country, but also being placed in a foreign country, and then to have the fathers sold off, and the mothers sold off, and also the children separated, the fear that caused. And some of these children will never be reunited with their biological parents because of what has transpired with this policy. And so I want to thank the woman from San Diego and those who have spoken, and certainly ask for a resounding aye vote on AJR 46.
Thank you, Ms. Gibson. Ms. Quirk-Silva, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A few weeks ago, I stood to speak on this policy, and even a few weeks ago, we had little indication of some of the information that we have received, which has been so horrifying and startling that I think many of us have had a hard time processing it. This last weekend, there were thousands that marched across the country basically saying we need to keep families together. This, again, is not a Republican, Democrat issue. This is an American issue. And I stand, again, as a mother and as an educator to try to make some sense of this. And I know we have the Daddy's Caucus here, of course, the Mommy's Caucus, and grandmothers and grandfathers. And the picture I paint is I have 4 of my own growing children. And I think about one of my daughters who I had to rock every night, and she had a special blanket. And when I'd put her to sleep, I had to carefully put her in the crib with her blanket after she was asleep. Otherwise, she would wake up and cry and cry. And I think of all of the ways mothers and fathers put their kids to sleep. For many of them, there's a special toy, there's music, or whatever it is they use, and within a moment to be torn away from your mother or father or caregiver and be left alone without those things that soothe children. I also think about as kids get older, for so many parents right here in this room, when they get to 6th grade, many of them go off for the first time to camp. And that's a very big deal, and their bags are packed, and yet parents are nervous, and letters are written, and tears, and yet they know their parents are coming back and they're going to see them, and it's very emotional. But again, to think about having a child ripped away from you and not know if you're ever going to see them again, particularly for those young babies who don't even know how to speak yet, hoping that maybe they did take a fingerprint so they could be reunited. And then again now to see some of those reunions and just see the sobbing and know this is not right. So whichever way you feel about a policy, we know that this policy is not right, and we have to dig deep and we have to look within our hearts to say that we can do better. We can fix what is not right. So I urge your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Quirk-Silva. Mr. Thurmond, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. I rise in support of AJR 46. I thank my colleague from San Diego for her leadership in bringing it forward, and for all those who have spoken and will speak on this matter today. And I echo the sentiments of those who have spoken that we should never separate our families. And I rise, while the circumstances are not what I would hope, I feel honored to be able to stand on this floor and to be able to speak on this resolution. On my mother's side, all of my aunts and uncles and my grandparents were immigrants, every single one of them, born someplace else, coming to this country in hopes of creating a better life. My grandmother came here, and she essentially, as a teenager, cleaned people's bathrooms. My aunties, many of them were low-paid healthcare assistants who would bathe someone or change them or tend to whatever their physical needs might be. And while my family was never split up because of deportation or immigration consequences, my heart goes out to those families who have been separated from their children, because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that any separation from a child can be devastating and can have lifelong impacts for them. I know what it's like to be separated from family, though. While it was not related to immigration, many of you know that I lost my family at a very early age. When I was 6 years old, I lost my mother to cancer. My father was not in my life, and I got sent to live with someone who I never met before, and I did not see most of my siblings for almost 10 years. Now, fortunate for me, the person who I was sent to live with was a family member, albeit a cousin who I never met till I showed up on her doorstep. It was still difficult. It was difficult as a child to not understand that your mother's not coming back, to not understand where you are, to not see a familiar face. And I say that and lift that up to ask you to think about what those impacts must be for the 9-month-old, for the 1-year-old, for a child of any age who is separated from his or her mother and father, or from their siblings, or from similar surroundings. What's equally troubling to me is that while these devastating policies have been carried out, many companies have profited significantly from this work in just a short period of time. And we should put a spotlight on that. Many of the private prisons have put profits over what I would say are American values and principles, family. And this administration has allowed for this divisive and cruel policy to become a profit venture for many. California has the second highest number of immigration detention facilities in the country. Almost half of the state's detention facilities are operated by private companies to detain immigrant children from communities throughout the country. These companies housed nearly 75% of California detainees in 2017 and 71% of detainees nationwide. And in 2017, these private prison companies housed and profited off of over 3,000 immigrant detainees in California. One company alone, GEO, collected approximately $220,000 a day of taxpayer money. Nationally, this same company receives more money for immigration detention than any other ICE contractor, while their facilities across the country have been cited for some of the most inhumane practices. Another company, CoreCivic, the largest for-profit prison company, was contracted for just under $135 million for ICE-related services in 2017. And this year, California will spend $180 million on these companies for various services, including housing California inmates in and out of the state. We should stand up as Californians, as Americans, and say that we really care about family values, that we should follow the tradition of this state. We have invested in making it easier for naturalization. We should stand up and be leaders for our nation and say it's time to create a responsible immigration platform that creates a pathway towards citizenship. We should say that we value families and keeping them together no matter the circumstances upon which that they arrive. And we should say that we're not going to allow profiteering to benefit those who would stand to separate companies, separate children so that their companies can profit. I respectfully ask for your aye vote on AJR 46.
Thank you, Mr.